Commission meeting to order for Thursday, August 6th of 2020. May I have a roll call, please?
John Brown.
Here.
Scott West.
Here.
Leon Davis.
Here.
Craig Bowman.
Here.
David Randolph.
Here.
Travis Fulkerson.
Here.
Carol Minden.
Here. Do I hear a request to approve the minutes from July 23rd?
I'll make a move to approve the minutes for July 23rd.
Second, Craig Bowman.
John Brown.
Yes.
Scott West.
Yes.
Leon Davis.
Yes.
Craig Bowman.
Yes.
David Randolph.
Yes.
Travis Fulkerson.
Yes.
Carol Minden.
Yes. First item on the agenda is regarding subdivision signs for review of the subdivision signs related to construction. Marseille?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This was brought to us by Tanner Rush. He's the development coordinator and has been the chief building inspector at the city of Jenks for a long time. He is very passionate about the community and seeing it get cleaned up. And before we get too far into the report, I'll let you know that he is happy to visit with you. If you all feel like that you have questions that I cannot answer, I'm happy to have this tabled until the next regularly scheduled meeting. But I'll do my best to make the presentation. He brought this to staff, the idea of getting things cleaned up several months ago, and once we said yes, this sounds like a good idea, he and Vincent Ortega went out and started taking photographs and kind of giving the general location of these signs. So everything that you see in the packet starting on page 7 includes a general area description, and all of these subdivisions are 70% or more built out, and a lot of them are very, very close to being 100% built out. So the code allows for the Planning Commission to make a decision about when a sign can be taken down. And on page 5, it kind of talks about temporary construction signs. The Planning Commission shall require the removal of signs which are no longer considered temporary or shall require repair or maintenance thereof. And we did talk a little bit about how that process might look, because the code doesn't really spell it out. So that's something that you're certainly can weigh in on if you have a preference. Our thought was to send a letter to the developer of the original developer of the subdivision and let them know. The code also says, let's see here. I'm a lot tonight. Planning Commission considerations, and I'm reading from page 6. Temporary development construction signs shall be allowed for the first 6 months of use during construction, and I believe in these cases we're well beyond that. After 6 months, the Planning Commission shall require all signage related to construction in regards to construction activity and to the status of the project. They shall determine if the construction signs are unnecessary because the development is substantially complete, and if they should remain another 6 months or specified time period, or repaired if necessary. So then you can continue reading, which you probably are already familiar with the rest of the information. So they highlighted a couple of corners, intersections, and then some of them are just along, some of them are in the right of way, some of them are not. And if you look on page 7, this is 125th and Elm. This is Yorktown, and we very conveniently built the sidewalk around that one, so no pedestrian activity was impeded by the sign. If you look further down at 131st and Elm, this is probably one of the worst areas where you got a little bit of, we call them snipe signs, plus we have other, and in some cases these are off-site advertising, which aren't really allowed anyway. On page 8, 111th in Cleveland, the Brightling Village, 81% complete. Yorktown at 125th and Elm, 91% complete. Country Hollow, 88% complete. On page 10, Of 131st and Harvard, Providence Hills, only one lot left. And 134th and Harvard, another sign for Providence Hills. 131st and 4th Street on page 11. You have multiple signs there, primarily Yorktown and Wallace Homes and Shaw Homes at Oak Ridge down at 112th and Elwood. And then the last one that we kind of highlighted on page 12 was Haddington Heights, which is located 110th and Fur, and that one is 78% complete. So I think the big takeaway, we thought we wouldn't want to bring these to you every time a subdivision is within 6 months of a sign. We would, as a staff at this point, would prefer to do it maybe twice a year, just kind of highlight, hey, these subdivisions are over 70% built out or 75% out or built out, and we would like you to consider giving us the ability to contact these owners and developers and let them know we're ready for their signs to come down. And that's about all I had to say. Tanner did text me. He said he was available if we wanted, and I gave him the night off. Just kidding. He's on vacation. But I told him we definitely did not need him to take time out of his vacation to speak. We can either continue this item, like I said, if you have more questions, or you can make a decision tonight. Either way is perfectly fine with me. So with that being said, do you have any questions that I might try and answer?
Okay, in spite of Craig's comment, I'm going to jump in here just for a minute, Marseille. I actually like the idea of addressing this. I'm with Tanner. I hate clutter. I hate clutter in the community, and being on a corner lot, I get abused a lot by people putting signs up thinking that that they want to point things into their neighborhood for properties for sale and garage sales and all of that kind of fun stuff. Also, I think I get a little annoyed with all the code enforcement issues that we have with our signage around election time. Couple of observations. These developers that set up these communities make quite a commitment, financial commitment to Jenks. And I think, the language, I've got no challenges with the language that's proposed. I would suggest maybe some consideration that we actually offer the developers to put some permanent signage following our normal sign standards. And the reason I would think that, just thinking from a real estate background, if I were the developer of, let's say, Providence Hills, so they may be near completion where the temporary signage is no longer applicable under the code, but how many times do we get a development that's fully sold out, and a lot of the developers are they're doing new developments, and if they've got some kind of a permanent signage that says we did this location, then they can reference, yeah, we did Providence Hills or we did Oak Ridge, so that if somebody was wanting to see where they've got evidence of their contribution to the community, I just think giving them the opportunity for permanent signage, in spite of whether or not it's sold out at 75% or 80%, I just think that we ought to give them some consideration on that. Last comment, it's a bit of a segue. I'd like to see us, and I know we've talked about on the appearance review process and on signage standards, I'd like to get some real clarification. There was a period of time that we had everything came to us on appearance review on signs, and then there was a period of time where that kind of went away. And I had some personal concerns about that, because when that went away was when our dispensaries first started to appear. And this is a little bit off subject, but we have at Elm Street Market, what originally came in as American Shaman, concerns that I had when we approved that on CBD sales was that it was going to turn into a dispensary, which it did. And they've changed hands, the signage changed. We never saw anything on their signage change. And right now the signage that they've got around their store looks like something with a circus with lots of colored lights. It goes all the way around the office. We also had Eden Cannabis that showed up, and then Main Street Meds. None of those signs ever came to us. And I don't know if that was for political reasons or why it never came, but it would be nice if we had a standard on signage and appearance review that we consistently applied. Last thing would be, when we talk about signage, if we're looking at that have been staked out into the yard that have violated our ordinances on sign displays. And I just think if we're going to penalize the developers, we need to look at some abuses in other areas around the city. That it's, again, it's a code enforcement issue, but I don't like seeing things go on the books in the way of ordinances or laws if we're not willing to enforce them. So that's my 50 cents on the subject.
Would you like me to respond now or after, or wait until we have any other questions?
I'm actually okay with the language on it. Like I said, I think it'd be good if we were to allow the developers, maybe we can do this in the process when they're approving, a PUD or any other type of project, to say, do you want to go ahead and in your proposals go to permanent signage versus the temporary signage? Just include that in our process.
So let me make a clarification. You would say, let's look at page 7, where we have Yorktown with this very large sign that technically encroaches the sidewalk. You're saying that you would be comfortable in the future if the language were changed, or they ask in a PUD process, that sign be allowed to be permanent at that size and location?
Yeah, I think what I'd like to see is that we just encourage them in the process when they're starting a development to establish permanent signage that's conforming to the code right now. So like 40 feet from, wherever the residential houses start, and then following all the other sign standards that we use for businesses. So
generally they have a monument sign, and so I'm trying to get clarification. So you're saying in addition to a monument sign, you feel comfortable with a more or less advertising sign for that developer?
I think when they develop a unit, when they develop an area, if they're following our other conforming sign standards, when I look through, and I appreciated the work that you guys put into giving us examples, I look at Country Hollow and the quality of that sign, I would say, is consistent with everything else we've seen that has come from Appearance Review Committee. Probably the only thing that's different there is, again, they've got pricing information, which is more of a development type of aspect, or a real estate side. But if the developer wanted to, have some kind of marking that showed, hey, this is a development we did, I wouldn't see a problem with that personally.
Okay.
Well, can I jump in and say, there is absolutely no way I would be in favor of doing any of that. All that is doing is bringing more signs. If you look at Country Hollow, you can tell that that's a Country Hollow neighborhood, and if I'm a builder, I can say, I built homes in Country Hollow. These signs need to go. I thought this was going to be an easy, no-brainer.
Yeah.
If a neighborhood is built over more than 70 or 75%, it's time to remove the sign. Those builders are going to want to get those lots sold as quick as possible, and they'll be pushing it without a sign or having a sign out there.
Yeah.
But putting signs around Jenks, I'm absolutely against that.
Yeah, and again, I'm not.
I totally agree with Greg.
Yeah.
I think these signs, they look temporary. When there's a strong windstorm that comes through, they get knocked down. They look like it's under construction, and I agree. Once it gets to be 71-75% filled, then they should go away.
And I'm okay with that. Like I said, I have no problems with the language. My bigger concern is that we're looking to penalize the developers that are investing in the community, but we're not enforcing our other sign standards around the community.
John, one step at a time. We're addressing these construction signs, and it's a good thing that this is brought to our attention. This is a great first step so that we can move forward with the community and clean up some of the stuff. Any other comment?
Yeah, let me add to that. I mean, I think the difference is that it's we're talking about things that are in residential areas, and you're allowing commercial advertising in residential areas. I mean, yes, maybe the Country Hollow sign would be something that might get approved in a business outside of a business, but it's not going to be something that should get approved, or we should even be considering as an option outside of the neighborhood. If the builders want to do that, they can advertise in other ways, and so I don't think a permanent sign should even in any way be considered. I agree that we need to remove these temporary signs and move on. I think it's a simple, straightforward issue today. I don't think we need to complicate it with the permanent stuff.
Yeah, no, and I'm okay with that. Just kind of highlighting the inconsistency, because it's been an issue that we've gone around the mountain on a few times.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with enforcing the code in other areas, but I think that exactly right. Commissioner Mendon was exactly right that we one issue at a time. What we've got before us is pretty clear cut and straightforward to me. I think we approve it and then encourage staff to continue to bring these types of issues to us if they need our assistance in enforcing the code.
Yeah. So,
anyone else want to speak on this topic?
I do, after Mercedes.
Go ahead.
But I was gonna say, sorry, sometimes this gets a little tricky. What I was gonna say on Country Hollow, Tanner did bring up that the HOA has talked about the significance of that sign and maybe converting it to a message board for Country Hollow, because it is more substantial than some of these others. The others are 2 posts with, a big poster board, so to speak. So I think once they get the letter, we may hear back from them, but that would definitely be a different time and a different hearing. So they may want to do something. They may ask. I did look. It is part of a PUD, and they could possibly have a PUD amendment. I would not want that to become a standard protocol for subdivisions.
Okay. Leon?
Well, I think Mercedes kind of helped me out a little bit on that sign for Country Hollow. I mean, that's a pretty substantial sign, and in terms of maintenance, it looks like it's been well maintained. I just want to, my opinion is, I think that when I look at this stuff on 131st and Elm, I'm not a fan of all that garbage signage being on the corner like that. But in terms of some of these developments, I believe that you got to take it as a case-by-case basis in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. I don't know what that right number is in terms of completion of the development, but I know in Yorktown, isn't there another phase of Yorktown going in place right now? A little bit further down that corner. And so I think that in terms of people who are looking at Jenks and trying to determine in terms of where they want to live, I know me and my wife, we depended heavily upon these signs when we decided to move to Jenks. We did not, we just drove out, we looked at the areas, we looked at the signs, drove in and determined where we wanted to live based on that sign. So it did help us. And so I don't want to, to try to slap the developers for the work and the risk and the investment they're making in our community. But on the other side of that, the other signage, that little quick signage, I can't remember the term that Mercedes used to describe it. I'm not a fan of that at all. And it kind of irritates me when people put those signs up and they don't go back and clean them up. But in terms of these other signs, Mercedes, how do we do it here? Do we actually give them the temporary signage a license agreement to go in the right of way? Or we actually has to pay a fee to do that?
On election signs, there is a process that they are supposed to go through. Almost nobody does. On construction signs, they are allowed by right to put up construction signs.
Okay. So I know that, in the past, in my involvement with the municipality, we make those type of signs require license agreements to have specific terms and triggers that they have to go back up for review. So I'm just throwing that out there as a suggestion.
Right, and I think that's something we could address during the the UDO update as we're going through the development ordinances. Signage will be a very big, very significant part of that because we don't necessarily meet all the requirements of the law. And so you'll see some dramatic changes in that area, and that's definitely something we can consider.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I just a question, and Marcia, I asked you about this, but I just wanted to make, this goes to enforcement. I wanted to make sure we're enforcing this evenly, that you're not leaving out some signs that otherwise meet this criteria. Can you respond to that?
Are you talking about similar to what Commissioner Brown said?
Well, you know, I emailed you about this before, but signs that are over 6 months and substantial development has happened. I want to make sure we apply this evenly and not favor certain developers. And I also, related to that, I think you're hearing from everyone here that we're in favor of this process, and
Sure.
we're glad that you and staff are bringing it, and, you know, we'd like to clean it up. I just want to make sure we're not carving some out improperly, you know, for any reason, so.
I did speak to Tanner about that, and he said that all of these, he only chose subdivisions that were 70% and above to represent. So he went through, looked at the numbers, number of lots platted, number of lots that have building permits on them, and he went out and then looked at the signs and took pictures of subdivisions with 70% and above.
Okay,
So
I think
it was
that's
the same.
70% fair, you know, just, and then apply that, so, okay,
Yeah.
okay. And then it sounds like we have not contacted the developers.
No, we've
yet.
made no steps. We just wanted to bring it to you all first and find out how you felt about it. And then if you had a preference for how we move forward, the code doesn't give us any direction. We had kind of a game plan just to contact them initially. But if you have something that you felt was important, we can definitely take that into consideration.
Okay, yeah, let us know what they respond with, and I guess there's this mechanism where they can reapply and ask for another 6 months, and we'll see what they say. I also, just for the record, think that Yorktown sign with the sidewalk around it is kind of ridiculous. We shouldn't let that happen.
That's a big sign.
Okay, do I hear a motion for a recommendation to approve?
I'll make that motion. This is John.
I'll go ahead and second. It's David.
John Brown,
Yes.
Scott West,
Yes.
Leon Davis,
No.
Craig Bowman,
Yeah.
David Randolph,
Yes.
Travis Fulkerson,
Yes.
Carol Minden.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask Marseille if it's possible, since this is an issue, if we can look at closely at 1021-4, Section P on abandoned signs. I know we've raised this before and council has not really acted on it, where we've got businesses that have gone out and left their signage up. It kind of, again, it goes back to what Commissioner Randolph was saying, on an equal enforcement. If we're going to enforce sign ordinances, I think we need to look through 1021 and make sure that we're making efforts on all of those sections in the code. So that was 1021-4P.
P as in Paul.
P as in Paul. Thank you.
I will state for the record, a little bit of that is cross-department. So most of these things are taken care of through code enforcement, which is not part of the community development or planning. But I will definitely bring that back up again.
okay, next item on the agenda is JZ 20-660, request by Duncan McBride for rezoning from light office to RS3, general location being 210 South 5th Street.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. McBride contacted the city several months ago, and I believe he was in the process at that time of I think he was getting he was doing something, and lawfully they asked him to confirm the zoning. So originally his father lived there and officed out of the property, and he needs it for his records to be residential zoning. And I said that very clunkily, but he can tell you, he can restate it in a better way if he needs to. So basically, has always been a residential home, but like I stated, for a while, it was also an office. It is no longer an office. Mr. McBride has lived here now for a long time. You can see the location of it is right next to an RM2, and then there's a little bit of CS over to the west, and then he's got residential on the north, east, and south. So he's asking for, we requested RS3. You could always do a less intense if you want, and as you'll notice, there's RS3 around him on two sides, and then I believe RS2 on the south. I don't have a preference one way or the other, and Mr. McBride, I am certain, does not have a preference either. If you look on page 15, there's an aerial view kind of showing the location, and then I also showed a front view of the home. Then if you look on page 16, it has some street views. This request fits the current comprehensive plan and is surrounded by other residential properties. Staff does not have any conditions for this approval and does recommend that you approve JZ 20-660 to RS3.
Okay. Any questions or comments on this?
I appreciate Mr. McBride coming to clear this up. This seems very straightforward to me, but I'm curious to hear from the rest of the commission.
Yeah, so I was, the only question I had, this sits on Aquarium Place, right?
It's actually on 5th Street, but Aquarium is the road that goes across the north side.
Okay, so it fronts to 5th Street, but,
Yes.
but to its north is on Aquarium. And Aquarium, as I understand it, I mean, isn't that part of what we're trying to have as a corridor for some business development?
It does have kind of a line there of demarcation in the new comprehensive plan even.
Okay, so that was the question I was going to ask in the new comprehensive plan. Where would this piece of property fit in the comprehensive plan?
It should be, let me grab it for you, but I believe that line is right there. Let me look at it real quick. Hang on. So north of him, north of Aquarium Place would be considered the downtown, and then south is the single family. So so that is, he's right on the cusp there, and it could go either way. But Mr. McBride, I believe, and he can speak for himself, intends to stay there and use it as a residence. I like the RS3, knowing that one thing in the comprehensive plan is really looking for higher density in the downtown and allowing for accessory dwelling units, and that would easily accommodate an accessory dwelling unit if he went that direction.
Okay. Anyone else? If there are no other issues, do I hear a motion?
Okay, I'll move to approve JZ 20-660.
Leon Davis, I'll second it.
John Brown,
Yes.
Scott West,
Yes.
Leon Davis,
Yes.
Craig Bowman,
Yeah.
David Randolph,
Yes.
Travis Fulkerson,
Yes.
Carol Menden.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is JZ 20-661 PUD 121, a request by Josh McFarland for plan unit development at 716 West Main. And I see on the staff report that the staff has asked for additional information and is asking us to continue this item to the August 17th special hearing to allow the applicant to provide supplemental documents. So may I have a motion for that?
Madam Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to ask that you move it to the September 3rd meeting. I did state in the staff report that we could probably hear it on the 17th, but I've not heard back from the applicant, and I feel like at this point they're going to need even more time.
Okay,
Thank you.
so moved. You hear a motion?
John Brown, I'll make that motion.
Craig Bowman, I'll second.
John Brown,
Yes?
Scott West,
Yes.
Leon Davis,
Yes.
Craig Bowman,
Yes.
David Randolph,
Yes.
Travis Fulkerson,
Yes.
Carol Menden.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item on the
Madam
agenda.
Chair, sorry, I apologize again,
It's all
Carol.
right.
Marseille, one thing as you're working on this, I did not see it I couldn't find it in our ordinances yet. I was in the process of looking it up, and it could be an able commission. As you're working through this one, because there was a brewery proposed within there, somewhere in the back of my head, I'm thinking we got a restriction on how close they can be located to a church. And we've got the church that is there at Melody Lane, so you might want to double check that before you bring that back.
I thank you, Commissioner. I've talked to them about it, and that I can tell you in advance that the church has signed off that they are in support of it. And after that, it's going to boil down to what the law says and how they hammer that out.
I believe when they apply with ABLE, they're gonna find out that they can't be within, like, take us 500 feet of the church.
I've heard it both ways, so I might contact them myself just so I can have clarification.
Yeah, just to be sure. It's a big expense to go through.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
The next agenda item is JZ 20-662, request by Amy Boris for a zone change from Ag to Residential 2 at the general location of 10601 South Elgin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This item came to us several months ago as well. The applicant hired an architect. They were in the process of trying to build a house. The current zoning is ag. They thought about going to the Board of Adjustment and having a special exception or variance. I highly discouraged that. I felt like there was no reason to go ahead and just rezone it and get it into compliance so that they can meet the bulk and area rather than having an encumbrance on the property. So they have decided that that was the path and the direction that they would go. We did consider if it could be RS1, RS2. I've recommended RS2. That gets them plenty of room to meet all the setbacks and still have a pool. So this applicant is excited to build a new house. The home that was there previously has already been removed. There, if you look on page 44 of your packet, you can kind of see an aerial view, and you can see the old homestead that was there. And then on page 45, I have a picture. On page, let's see, 48 of your packet, it shows the site plan. What started this conversation is there is a discrepancy between the property pin and the intersection, and the city is requiring dedicated right-of-way or at least requiring them to meet the setbacks where we have indicated that the property pin is. So that is where the conversation started, and everybody sat down, and we just decided rezoning would get us there. They can still go with the property pin location that we've identified as accurate and meet the bulk and area. Staff has no conditions for approval and does recommend it. And I don't believe anyone is present on this case. So staff is asking for approval of JZ 20-662, a rezoning from ag to RS2.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
So just a quick question. On page 48, I'm looking at the bulk requirements and I didn't see kind of a pool sketched out. I want to make sure there's space for that before we approve this. I can't recall exactly what the requirements are, but I know it can't be right up to the property line.
They have to be
recall
10
those?
feet. The edge of water has to be 10 feet from the property line. And I've already made that comment to them, and the architect is aware of it and said it would fit great.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve?
Just got.
Travis, I'll move approval of JZ 20-662.
Scott, I'll second.
John Brown,
Yes.
Scott West,
Yes.
Leon Davis,
Yes.
Craig Bowman,
Yeah.
David Randolph,
Yes.
Travis Fulkerson,
Yes.
Carol Minden.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is JZ 20-663 PUD 30C for a minor amendment. Request by Bell Land Use LLC for approval of a minor amendment to PUD 30C to adjust required parking. This will be at the Riverwalk Terrace and East 91st Street. Marcy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This item is brought to you from Mr. Robert Bell. He's representing the owner and developer of the Riverwalk Apartments. What has happened is, due to COVID, the educational facility that the developer has a contract with, things have changed. As you know, everything has changed, and they're doing school different. And so in order to kind of subsidize the apartment project, they wanted to offer it and make it available to the public. Someone on staff saw that they were advertising, contacted me. I did the research. The research is included. This was always the case. There's always been a trigger mechanism in place that required additional parking. They're just asking that they don't have to do all the additional parking immediately, since they're not even sure. It may be that it's 100% housing a year from now, or I should say it could go back to 100% educational housing. So they're just asking for a little bit of flexibility. We talked about it. I'm comfortable with the language that they have presented in here. Staff has no other comments. I tried to highlight it to the best of my ability and give you as much of the original details of the PUD as possible. But basically, they were required in PUD 36 or PUD 30C to build 316 spaces, and that is what they built. The code would have required 136, and they were supposed to, if they ever went to public housing or regular rental rates and occupants, then they were to build that extra 100 spaces. So tonight they are asking to amend. This is a minor amendment. It was not advertised, so we have not received any public comment. And the modification is for the parking requirement only, so everything else stays in place in the planned unit development. Number one, they request to convert a minimum of 15 apartments in 2020 for public use. And once they hit the 100th unit for traditional public use, then they would be required to build the entire 439 spaces, which is the extra 100, about 100. Riverwalk Crossing Apartments is supposed to report to the city planner and city manager on a quarterly basis how many of their units are being leased for educational housing versus public housing. And that pretty well sums it up. Mr. Bell is present to give you more details if you have additional questions.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions from the commissioners?
Observation, I've got no challenges with the concept or the change in spaces. However, we did not address the fact that the PUD had non-conforming space sizes. The sizes are smaller than what we have in code. So are we going to address whether or not they need to increase the size of those spaces?
the size of the spaces would not change. It would be per what was approved in the original PUD, which it would be smaller. So those gentlemen and dualies are gonna have a problem. Or ladies, those ladies and dualies.
Any other questions?
Marcel asked, where would the additional parking go here? I mean, I'm looking at an aerial photo.
Sorry, but David, I apologize. I have, or
Okay, no
Commissioner, if I can get Brandon to pull it up, he's working on it. Mr. Bell did provide a drawing.
Oh, good.
Okay, good. I'm just wanted to make sure there's
Yeah.
somewhere to put it.
Yes, and that was already part of the plan. So that was where they had originally planned that they would do additional parking and they would stay with the original plan. So there's
Okay.
some along that entrance on the, we'll call it the south, and a little bit on the east, so to speak.
There goes the volleyball pit.
And I would have just a little bit to add to what Marseille said, and that's it, if I could.
Okay, if hold on one second, Robert. Let me make sure that anyone else has any questions so we can just have you address it all at the same time. Any other questions?
Yeah, Commissioner, I do. So I guess two things. First of all, I want to clarify. So they're changing nothing until they lease out 100. Is that what I?
To the public, yes. They would
Right.
not build any more parking, and he does, Mr. Bell has provided the math in his documentation, and it looks like that there would be no real issues with the additional space. They have enough additional space based on the map that he's provided.
And then I guess the other question I had, that in looking at the aerial photo, does converting the areas that are grass, green space, does that change the amount of green space in that development to a level that's below what the city prefers or wants to have in most cases? I mean, how much of an impact would it have on that?
Commissioner, it's my understanding that all of that was calculated during the first approval, and so the amount of green space that was required and approved would still be met even with the parking, because the parking was always the plan. It was more of a timing mechanism.
Oh,
To me, this looks great, very accommodating for these people. It seems like something easy to approve to me.
I think so too. Okay, I will allow Mr. Bell, if you could come forward, speak up and give us your name and address.
I'm Robert Bell. My address is 1011 West G Street, and thank you and Chairman and members of the commission. I think this is a simple application, in that Marseille's right. Most of all this was vetted when it was approved originally. In fact, the site south of the swimming pool was designed to have parking and also even more units in a condominium or in a high-rise type setup, more of a sellable type condominium type product in there, and parking was supposed to be inside the building as a parking garage. All that was discussed and vetted in the original approval. The Riverwalk Apartments was approved with apartments, and then the First Amendment came in when they proposed the educational housing, and then we changed the parking criteria to reduce the number of spaces. I think it's what was not vetted, and is important to this application, is that it was never considered that the transition to a public apartment setting was over time. It was not a reduction type use. And what we got right now and I'm limited in things I can say about the company that leases the apartments. Obviously with COVID and the way the market is that they're involved with, they're planning to reduce their their education program to some degree, but they're not exterminating it. So now we're faced with the expectation that to help all the parties involved, instead of having vacant spaces out there, or vacant units out there, they can recoup some of that cost by opening up some to the public. So the idea of 15 per year, and what is the trigger point that says, you know, that you can't go past this unless you put all the parking in. And we kind of, I did a number, I did some research on how many cars are utilized by the students, and it's really very little. No more than 20% per year, and a lot of years it's zero. But to fall on the conservative side, I said that 50% of the students that are living in the building have cars, and by utilizing that 50%, I think that backs up to we don't even get close to filling that parking until we have at least 100 spaces, actually a little more than 100 spaces. So I set the criteria to trip over that if they get 99 spaces and go to the number 100, then they have to put all the parking in. There's still going to be open parking spaces. Asphalt's a funny product. If you put it in 210 and you overutilize it, you'll break it up. But if you put it in and don't use it, you're going to end up with a problem with it deteriorating and grass growing through it and other things at that point. So I just think this is a prudent thing. And the number of spaces will not even get close, even at 100 units, but I think that's a good number to fall on, and that's why I set up that way. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I'll just make a comment. I'm more willing to consider this with COVID, everyone's needing to repurpose things and make do. I'm otherwise not really excited about changing original plans if something was approved a particular way. So just a comment.
Good comment. Do we hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve JD 20-663.
This is Scott. I think Mr. Bell's comments are spot on. You know, we went through this 11 years ago, and I go through there quite frequently, and that lot is no more than 5% full at any time. So more than adequate spaces. You definitely don't want to overbuild it as far as parking and not utilize it. So I will second this.
John Brown,
Yes.
Scott West,
Yes.
Leon Davis,
Yes.
Craig Bowman,
Yes.
David Randolph,
Yes.
Travis Fulkerson,
Yes.
Carol Minden.
Yes. Last item on the agenda is a plat amendment request by Alan Betchen for approval of a change to limits of no access on 2900 West Main plat. General location is the southeast corner of 96th and Franklin. Marseille?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This item is brought to you. We have a commercial entity wanting to go in at that intersection on the southeast, and they were needing to shift the limits of no access and change it a little bit. We originally were just going to deal with that one request, but when staff began to look at it, we reached out to Mr. Betcham at AAB Engineering and asked him to go ahead and provide, to kind of shift it all. There is very generous spacing, I think, in each case, and Alan can answer it probably quicker than I can. There's over 200 feet, which is more than what most municipalities require for spacing. It gets lots 3 and 4 direct access, and we asked them to widen the access for the, I think it is East 47th Street. For some reason, the plat had that access at 40 feet, and we asked them to go to 60 feet, which is what the actual street is at that intersection. So on page 62 of your report, there's an aerial view. You can see where the little balloon is. It's going to show that's where the entity is trying to go in. They're in the process of doing their due diligence, and this is part of the due diligence, is getting the accesses changed. I think it might be, yeah. So basically, they have provided access between lots 1 and 2. That did not change. Provide access between lots 3 and 4. Provide access between lots 5 and 6, and then change the width at Adams Street, and remove the access between lots 4 and 5. So those were the things that staff requested. I originally on the plat, the 2900 West Main, Mr. Carr was very integral in getting that one approved and working with the engineer of record at that time. And the idea was to have minimal access onto Main, and that was accomplished, but knowing the entity that's going in and the request that they have, we didn't want to do anything that would hinder the lots 3 and 4 from having direct access. So that is the purpose behind the changes. Staff does not have any, the biggest thing is making sure that this is filed at the county and tied to the plat. And that is what AAB Engineering will be taking care of. So staff recommends approval of the change of access, requiring the approved document to be filed of record with the Tulsa County Land Records and tied directly to this plat. I have no other recommendations. They've done everything that we've asked, and we hope that we get a great commercial entity very soon in that area.
Great. Any questions or comments on this one?
Marseille, I asked you, but just for the benefit of the group, you know, what is your view on curb cuts to kind of add some additional entrances off Main Street?
Commissioner, I think that we need to minimize the number of curb cuts as often as possible, and I think that it's always a good idea to have a backage road, or some people call them frontage roads, depending on where they're located. In this case, it would be nice to have had an easement across the back the whole way and dedicated, but sometimes it just doesn't work with the plan. And in this case, that was kind of the issue. So when possible, moving forward with plats, especially in particular parts of town, if we can minimize the number of curb cuts, that you have less risk of traffic issues and traffic injury due to wrecks and different things like that. But at the same time, really providing cross access or mutual access is probably very, very important, very key, because as a consumer, it's very frustrating when you need to get from A to B and you have to actually go all the way out, cross 2 lanes of traffic, come back over, and get back into the same subdivision. So I think really working with the applicants moving forward, making sure that that cross access is allowed from one lot to the other, and then having dedicated areas for them to travel safely without getting back onto the main streets.
Okay, thanks. And I don't really have a problem with this. I mean, ideally, it would have been nice to have a road just to the south of these lots on the north side, but, you know, that's a big street on Main Street, and it seems like what you're proposing works. So I'm okay with that, but I do encourage you and staff to minimize curb cuts and not have us turn into Memorial someday. So,
Yeah.
thanks.
Agreed.
Okay, do we hear a motion?
This is Scott.
Sorry, Steve.
Scott, I agree with David. I agree with David 100% on this. You don't want to turn into Memorial or 71st Street, over around the mall and Mingo and Garnett, where every single commercial entity seems to have its own access point, and it's just a total zoo over there. And we're not to that point now, but we're looking 10, 15, 20 years down the road. I would also ask that we really try to limit this in the future.
I agree. Thank you.
I think we all agree on that. Is there a motion?
This is John, so moved. To approve plat amendment to the change of access at 2900 West Main.
This is Travis, I'll second.
John Brown,
Yes?
Scott West, Leon Davis,
Yes.
Craig Bowman,
Yes.
David Randolph,
Yes.
Travis Fulkerson,
Yes.
Carol Minden.
Yes. Onto any other business, any other information for us, Marseille? Updates?
Yes. I want to remind everyone that we have a special hearing on Monday, the 17th of August. And as of right now, that will replace your Thursday night meeting. I didn't want you to have to meet twice in the same week. And so at this point, the only thing on that agenda will be the comprehensive plan. And thank you all for taking the time to visit with me on that. I appreciate your comments. The draft is already online, and I submitted all of the comments from the Planning Commission, from City Council, and they have updated that with one more exception. They're waiting on staff to get the land use map. There were one or two areas where we have some current applicants looking to change some things and have some exciting projects, and we want to try to maybe get that nailed down before we actually change the land use map. So thank you all very, very much for taking the time. If you haven't read it and you want to, it is available on the website, the Horizon Jenks website. So you have a special hearing. It'll be at 6 p.m. It will be virtual. Originally, they had planned to be here in person. But due to COVID, Cook County, which is primarily Chicago, if they were to come to Oklahoma, we're on the naughty list. And if they come here, they would have to go back and quarantine themselves for 14 days. And for some reason, they just weren't really interested in doing that, and I don't blame them. So I am very excited about it. I'm probably more excited about getting the zoning code updated. I think that's going to be a really outstanding project. So remember, as you're going through these cases and just in the next few weeks and months, things that you've thought about over the years that you've seen real issues with, problems with the code, or just things that you think is really important, shoot me an email and we'll make sure that we have that conversation and see how it can be applied moving forward. So special hearing on the 17th, no planning commission meeting on the 20th. And then September 3rd is the first planning commission meeting in September, and I'm going to bring the calendar to you all. And one of the things that I want you to think about, we're going to do a little bit of some data prep. The code allows for the planning commission to set their own calendar. So I want you to think about, do you want to have a calendar where you meet twice a month, or are you interested in going to once a month? It would be basically what it looks like to me, one heavy agenda versus two light ones. I don't know that we'll have, so just something to think about. It's something that some communities do two, some communities do one, and it is your right to do whatever you decide. So that'll be on the agenda. There was one more thing. Oh. We are trying to adopt some code language for the regulation of dispensaries, all of it, all things marijuana. all things medical marijuana. So we've got that language. I'll try to get that out to you. I think I was going to include it when I send my update out tomorrow for Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment and City Council. I'll include the draft version of that text. So definitely take a chance. If you get a chance, take a look at it, but that will be coming to you in September. So that's pretty much it. We do have the Melody Lane project coming up, and I think that's going to be exciting. We'll see what the Able Commission says. So I don't have anything else unless you have any questions for me.
Just a quick question for the special meeting on the 17th. Is there going to be an updated version of the comprehensive plan available, or just the initial version that was posted for the public?
No, you'll get an updated version,
Okay,
and
thanks.
I think they probably would have had it out by tomorrow, but staff has held them up on the land use map.
Okay.
They've got everything ready to go. I will make sure that you know when it's available. I'll try to send you the link to it. I think last time I sent a link, so I'll try to do that again so that you have full access to it ahead of time.
Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Have